The extended curfew, no doubt, comes at a time and governments around the world continue to carry out stringent measures to safeguard its citizens against COVID-19. While this may be a new phenomenon for some, it's really not the first time here in the Bahamas. Our Desmond Saunders provides an historical perspective in this next report.
Noted Bahamian historian and associate professor of history at the University of the Bahamas, Dr. Christopher Curry, believes the recently imposed 24-hour national curfew as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic represents a chain of events in Bahamian history dating back to the late 18th century when lockdowns were established to protect citizens during times of war and riots.
In L.D. Powell's Land of the Pink Pearl, written in 1888, he describes a curfew being established in Nassau. And the reason was quite interesting. And it wasn't because of a riot, it wasn't because of a plague or a pandemic. It was actually because they were trying to conserve the power. The gas lanterns that were being lit on Bay Street were quite costly. This was 1888. And so basically, to save money, the government established a curfew that everyone had to be inside and the lanterns were shut off by 9 o'clock each night.
Dr. Curry vividly recalls a curfew carried out during the 1942 Burma Road riot. The professor describes this period as one of the most fascinating events in Bahamian history.
It was established from June 1st, and it was extended for a whole week because of the riotous actions on Bay Street. What's fascinating about the Burma Road riot, and there were many soldiers that were brought in to police and enforce the curfew. There were persons who were curfew breakers, and it's reported in the newspapers that they were at one point, less than a week after the Burma Road riot, I think it was June 5th, they arrested 35 persons initially for being curfew breakers. And there were at least 5 Bay Street merchants who were part of that 35 that were arrested. And one of the 5 that was really interesting was none other than Roland Simonet, who would later become the Premier of the Bahamas.
Dr. Curry says the current 24-hour curfew was not as extensive as the 1942 curfew, but he did identify some similarities.
Persons, even 5 days after the riot, were upset by the curfew regulations because apparently people were used to eating their fine dinners at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And remember, this is in the summer, so the sun is setting, 7:30, 8 o'clock. And so the housekeepers and domestics who worked in these palatial homes in the east, for example, had to leave at a time that was beyond the curfew.
The historian is applauding the government's handling of the COVID-19 crisis as he believes that these steps are necessary to treat and manage the growing health threat. On a larger scale, he says a curfew should act as a temporary measure to achieve a greater feat of normalcy and another lesson in Bahamian history. Desmond Saunders, ZNS Network News.